Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us for this conversation that drives a ton of curiosity, propelled by passion. Joining me here is Jen, the co-founder of Awaken. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Nick.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being on here. Speaking of curiosity, I want to get into a variety of topics with you. We're going to go over Awaken, its role in the community, sexual exploitation, particularly here in Nevada, perhaps what we're even seeing nationwide. Certainly this is a hot button topic nowadays. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to weave into the upcoming film, At What Cost, and we'll get into that. But I'd like to start with you today with Awaken. One organization, two sites. What role does Awaken play in our local community? And talk about its national reach as well.
Yeah, of course. So Awaken has been in our community in Northern Nevada since 2011. Melissa Holland and I co-founded Awaken, and we were doing the work for about a year before, but really just saw a need, and we have a very unique community. We have a unique state in the fact that we have legalized prostitution. And so Nevada is the only state that has legal prostitution. And we've created avenues in, but it turned out we had created no avenues out. So the women can enter in, but there's no resources to help them get out, to help them escape. And so Melissa's very much wired to let me do something about it. And so at the time I had just met her, and I just felt just my heart being tugged at and said, what can I do to get involved? And so she was actually an intern she was a student at UNR, yeah. And she was then leading this group that a woman could get picked up for solicitation, and she could choose to go to therapy with Melissa as an intern leading this group. And so from day one, I was driving the women to and from their therapy appointments. Yeah. And in doing that, it's, what are your needs? You haven't eaten before. Well, let me pick you up a little bit earlier and let's go have dinner. Okay. You need errands that you have to run. Well, I can pick you up tomorrow. Let's go. And so we realized how ineffective only therapy is when as a community, we have no other resources for them. And, from the beginning, the model in 2011, 2012 was a safe house. You have to get a safe house. And we really recognized and felt like God's call. Like, you can take a woman off of the streets, you can send her to a safe house, to a program, you can get her restored, but then you send her right back to the community that exploited her in the first place. And so if Nevada doesn't wake up to this issue, if Northern Nevada doesn't become a safe city for these women and girls, then it's just going to continue the cycle over and over again. And so our name Awaken, actually, it comes out of the Bible, it comes out of Romans 13, but it's a call to the community. It's a call to the church to wake up and actually see what we're participating in and how we can be the solution.
We hear the word woke tossed around a lot. Oh, and nowadays, more people claiming that they're more awake. Well, let's stick with Awaken. And I want to speak about, what was your calling? What made you so passionate to be a part of Melissa's small therapy sessions that turned to getting food into what we know Awaken it is today? What was your passion?
When you meet the women and children that are affected, you cannot not want to do something. You cannot leave unchanged. William Force, he said, you can choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you don't know. And so I can never again say that I didn't know this was an issue. And to be honest, I grew up in Reno and I didn't know this was an issue. But in 2010, the veil was removed. Like, I actually saw clearly, and I got to meet the women and I got to hear their stories, and they are the most creative and resilient and loving and passionate, and you just love them like you love your sister or your friend, because they are, and they're real people, and they hurt and they rejoice and they laugh just like you and I would. And so for me to actually have the honor and the privilege of being able to enter into their life, I can't just now say I don't want to do anything, that it doesn't matter anymore, because I am forever changed and I am forever impacted because of what they've taught me and their friendship.
How are you able to navigate this space where some people from the outside in see the women as numbers, dollar signs? How are you able to bring that human aspect to it? You talk about, them now.
Yeah. If you want to see me go from 0 to 10, it is for somebody to say something derogatory or unloving to them, I will immediately, like, that is something that just automatically makes my blood boil, because I am so protective of them, because I've seen their struggle and I've seen what they've overcome and what they've been able to do. And I think that it's easy to stereotype. It's easy to just assume that it's their choices that led them into the situation, that they're just paying for their consequences, or they just like sex, or there's so many excuses and labels people want to attach to the women and the girls that we work with. And part of it is because I believe that when I say it's your choice to do that you just like sex or you want to do it, then it relieves my responsibility to have to do something. And it actually makes me feel better instead of me feeling like I actually have a responsibility. Because as a community, we've all contributed to this. We are like I said, we're the only state that has legal prostitution. That means we voted for it. We're in support of it. It's been on the ballot to overturn, and yet we haven't voted to overturn it. And so as a state, we're still continuing to say, we want this. We need this for our state. And yet we're refusing to actually look at the underbelly of it. What is it contributing to? Am I okay with my sister, my mom, my friend being exploited, being abused for my own benefit? Because realistically, it's all for the buyer's benefit.
When we look at the map of America, we have on the East Coast cities like New York, you go down to the south towards Atlanta, cross a little bit over the Mississippi. You know, we're seeing Dallas is the Houstons. And you get over to the west and you put your finger on California and Nevada. You know, why is it that commercial sex exploitation is so prevalent in Nevada society? I mean, you spoke about politicians are okay with it. The people here in Nevada are okay with it. We're voting for it. Why is it that it's so prevalent in our society, but we still turn a blind eye to it?
Yeah, Nevada actually, because we have legalized prostitution, we've created a market and a demand for it. And where you create demand, you have to bring in the supply. And so even though technically sex for sale is not legal in Reno or Vegas, it is legal in the counties outside. It's not legal here. And yet how much prostitution happens within our city limits? And I believe Melissa Farley once did a study, and it's close to like 90% of the prostitution that happens within Nevada is illegal. But we have it legally 15 minutes from where we're sitting. So why is it happening in our city streets every day? And it's because we've created that demand for it. And so because we have demand, we have to bring in the supply.
How dangerous is the demand?
Very dangerous. We're constantly, like, I know law enforcement, like, unless we tackle demand, the problem's going to continue. So within the triangle of trafficking, I believe you'll have a victim, you'll have a trafficker, and you'll have a buyer. But the buyer is the only one that you can remove and the whole thing ends. Because the buyer is the money that's fueling this. And so if women and children in our community didn't sell, a trafficker would find another product to sell that was profitable. But women and children are profitable in our state, and people are buying. And it's all fueled by money.
I have to push back a bit. Do you think the reason why it continues to be voted in and allowed and a blind eye turned towards it is the casinos boost the economy? The entertainment is a very large tourist attraction. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing with negating the factor of a buyer?
Yeah, and that's hard too, because Nevada is a sex tourism state, and we've actually branded ourselves as such. And so we believe the lie that Nevada actually needs this for our economy to thrive. We need the brothels tax money. I don't believe that's true. I do believe we would sustain it other ways, but we want to believe that we need their money. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I can tell you, Creighton University did a study, and they essentially scraped online ads for the selling of sex. And so if you posted 3 ads, it still gave you a unique number of 1. So it got rid of the duplicates. And what they found is Nevada by far had the largest illegal market for the selling of sex. We were 63% higher than the next highest state. We were double that of California. And so we're talking New York. We were higher than New York adjusted for population. And it's because we've created that market. And our politicians do back it, right? Like, we elect county commissioners that own brothels. We elected an assemblyman that owned a brothel. We have track coaches that also own strip clubs. And we're so desensitized to the issue, and we stamp, but it's a legal business. Legal doesn't mean safe. Legal doesn't mean beneficial to the people that it's actually hurting.
If we're seeing challenges that you're speaking of with negating the buyer, which propels us forward, what are some of the factors? And I kind of want to shift the conversation over to your 3 pillars, starting with prevention. Yeah. What are some of the main factors that are getting these women to even get involved with commercial sexual exploitation?
Yeah, for the women themselves, if you think about a vulnerability, why do you think the target age, or it's teenagers, right? Stats, and I don't love stats, but they'll say around 12 to 14 for the women that have entered into prostitution. That's when they're first entering in, but you have to know that their abuse started a lot sooner. And so what is the first onset of abuse, neglect, sexual assault, and abuse? And a lot of times we see really young ages. And so if you think about a teenager, if you think about that 14-year-old, think about their brain's not even fully developed. And so friends are their mirrors. What you think about me, I think about me. They can't really even think about cause and effect. And so they don't think through to the final consequence of things. And it's, high energy, and there's so many reasons that they would be the target age. And traffickers can then come in and be anything that they need to be. And so think about vulnerabilities of a teenager. If you come from a 2-parent home where finances aren't necessarily an issue, if you know where you're going to sleep tonight, then I don't have to entice you with a place to stay. But if you have the added vulnerability of foster care or poverty or even the single parent, I can tell you most of the traffickers that recruit the girls, they do it through relationship. They do it through love. That is the healthiest desire that is within each of us, the desire to be seen, heard, known, valued. And traffickers know how to be that. They wrap around the girls with said family, with friends, and they actually provide what I really do believe the family and the church should provide. And yet it's broken. And so there's lack, there's vulnerability. And so there are increased vulnerabilities that I do believe. You've got poverty, foster care. If you've experienced sexual abuse, that's probably the number one vulnerability that makes you more susceptible to then becoming trafficked. And our heart is really to intervene before you've ever experienced trafficking. That's part of our prevention pillar, is how can I actually disrupt that cycle and wrap around you with healthy mentors and individuals in your life to speak truth, to speak identity, to help you know how to have healthy boundaries in life and relationships on social media. How do we come around you and build you up so that you no longer look for value and worth from anybody else and from the world, and you're not enticed by things that he's going to offer you, whether it's a new iPhone or new pair of Jordans, or if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if that bottom rung is taken care of, he'll move up the pyramid, right? And so it can be as easy as food, shelter, basic necessities for life, on up to the new iPhone, Jordans, a sense of belonging. And so traffickers are smart.
It's it's fabricated promises.
Yeah.
You said one of the factors that stood out to me is lack of stable housing, homelessness. I was reading a stat that shows 1 in 5 homeless youth are led into trafficking, which estimates about 20% of the state's homeless youth females are trafficked for sex.
Yeah.
Are you referring to that it's a societal issue? Even when you speak about morality and you believe the church should be involved, or more ways of structure, are you referring that overall commercial sexual exploitation is a society issue?
I think it needs to be an us issue. At this point, well, I think your question is a few in one. And so let me address for the first one, is the homeless issue, is that if, say, a young teenage girl runs away from her home, she doesn't know where she's staying that night. She doesn't know where her next meal is coming from. She probably doesn't have transportation. The bus stop offers free Wi-Fi. And who's hanging out at the bus stations? Maybe a trafficker looking because they know vulnerable children hang out there. And so it's easy to spot. Those vulnerabilities are really easy to take advantage of. And hey, let me give you a place to sleep. So if you look at the definition of commercial sexual exploitation, the easiest way to break that down is any sex act in exchange of something of value. And so for a young girl, it could be exchanging sex for a place to sleep at night. If you are under 18 years old, that automatically qualifies as sex trafficking. If you are over 18 years old, on top of any sex act in exchange of something of value, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. And the coercion's the number one thing that we see because that's really the mental game, the mental chains. It's the manipulation, the lies. If you believe it to be true, then it's true. Yeah. And that's the hardest to prove, but the most frequent of what we see. And so if you're looking at that simple definition of a sex act in exchange of something of value, it really is, I'm going to sleep with you because I have no other option of where I'm going to stay tonight. And that's a vulnerability, right? But it's also an area where I do believe like we should be able to step in. If we have a community and if we have a family in need and they don't know where their housing is going to come from tonight, they don't know where their meals are going to come from tonight. If kids are in foster care and they're in an unsafe foster home situation, like we need to have better foster homes for them. We need to have better placements for them. We need to have better resources.
What's your message to the people who believe that, the women want to do it? Well, they go back, they dress up, they play their part, they want to do it. We live in a society where we're seeing like we're always searching for a scapegoat instead of a solution. What is your message to people who are willing to put the blame on the women? You tell me that they don't even want to be involved with it.
Yeah. At Awaken, we have worked with well over 1,000 survivors, probably close to 1,200 survivors, women and children. And I can tell you out of those 1,200, I have had direct impact in relationship with the vast majority of them. Like I said, they aren't nameless, faceless. Like they have names, they have stories. I know their families, I know them. And so when I really get to know them and to hear they don't want to do it, it's every time it's selling a piece of them. But if I have a family and I don't know how I'm going to provide for my family that night, then it is an easy choice to go sell your body so that I can pay rent, so I can put food on the table. And that's not your best choice. It's a lack of a choice. If I grew up being abused and neglected and honestly, sex has been taken for free, and then all of a sudden someone's willing to pay me, and there is like, most of the women, the vast majority, and I can't give you a percentage, but the vast majority that I've worked with, when they are in that life, they will say that they're choosing it, even though it's not their choice, because that's survival. And if you think of, like, even I hate the word victim because victim implies weak. It implies vulnerable, and weak and vulnerable will get you killed on the streets. And these girls aren't weak and vulnerable. They're extremely strong and resilient. And so even just our verbiage around, oh, well, they're just a victim, makes them sound poor and powerless, which they're not. And so sometimes I think we get confused in our mind about what choice actually is, whether it's their best choice. If they had every choice available to them, would they still choose it? And I guarantee that answer is no.
What about for the young women, the ones that are still teenagers, from what I consider innocent?
Yeah.
Most of society considers teenagers to be innocent. That's youth. What is the youngest women you have had a positive impact on?
Yeah, the youngest girl that I have personally worked with has been 11. And that's when she comes into our services. Like, I can tell you that abuse started far younger than 11. For her in particular, it was actually her aunt that was selling her for drug money.
What?
Yeah, so familial trafficking also happens. And so that 11-year-old was being sold by her aunt in exchange for drugs.
What about love?
What about love?
Where is it at? That blows my mind to hear that statistic, But this is something that you're dealing with every day.
Yeah, I remember the first time that I actually saw sex trafficking of a minor hit so one of the traffickers got arrested and he actually got charged with trafficking of a minor when we didn't even have sex trafficking defined in our state until 2013. Catherine Cortez Mastos defined it when she was the Attorney General. Before, it was just pandering, which is a slap on the wrist. But I remember the first time I saw sex trafficking of a minor hit, and I knew 3 of the girls that this trafficker had worked with. And at the time, there was 2 traffickers that were trafficking a few of our minors. And what I didn't realize at the time, because they had different last names, is the trafficker that was arrested and associated to a number of our girls, we had been working with his mother.
Wow.
And we had no idea until we saw a photo that hit social media of them together. And it's like, he grew up watching his mom be bought and sold. He grew up probably being abused.
Wow.
And so it's really common then for the abused to become the abuser. And so that helped at least shift my heart a little around the trafficker as well. It's like, he needs restorative services just as much as the girls that I'm working with. I do believe it's another organization that needs to come forth, because it'd be really hard for me to work with both. But it helped for me to actually see, like, this is still a broken individual that also needs hope and healing. Because all sides of the equation, whether you are the victim, the trafficker, or the buyer, they all need restoration. The buyer does as well. There's obviously something within him that isn't getting met, that he's trying to find through paid sex or abusing another human. Exerting his power or whatever that is within inside of him.
We spoke about prevention. We've hit a little bit on restoration. I want to talk about the city transformation.
Yeah.
You smiled when I brought that up. Why did you smile when I brought up city transformation?
I'd smile for all of it,
Yeah.
to be honest. I love all of it. But city transformation is, our city actually no longer buys sex. You want to know if Awaken's having impact in our community? Are people still buying sex? Like, that's what success really will look like for us. And so I do believe through education, we have seen a ton of changes over the years. And at the beginning, I even remember when we were starting Awaken, so 2010, 2011, and people were like, oh, it's not going to be successful. Like, the women want it. Like, it was crazy, because even if you looked at the ads, the advertisements in the airport or on the taxi toppers, all it was advertising brothels and strip clubs. And it wasn't even a money issue. We couldn't even offer to pay a higher amount to advertise for Awaken or a non-brothel strip club related business. And yet Edon comes into town and does a report that finds out that Northern Nevada, Reno, we're not family friendly. And so why aren't businesses wanting to come to Nevada? And it is because of our image around legal prostitution and around sex. And so they're the ones who petition, and then all of a sudden the community wants to see change, and now we're seeing change has happened. Now you can no longer advertise in the airport for a brothel or a strip club. And so that stuff's amazing, is that it wasn't us advocating for this. We actually couldn't do it. It was the community using their voice and advocating for change. And so there's only so much that we can do. And so one of our jobs is to educate you, because your sphere of influence is completely different to mine. Believe me, everybody in my sphere of influence over the last 13 years has heard about Awaken. Everybody I can possibly tell in my family and in my inner circle, they know.
Yeah.
But your inner circle doesn't know.
Yeah.
And their inner circle doesn't know. And I walk around Reno. There's so many people I don't know. I don't know 100% of the people in the grocery store most of the time when I'm in there, right? But that's somebody's inner circle, and they need to also know about this issue. And so what I love about the upcoming documentary is that this is going to be specifically for those that don't already know the issue of trafficking. This isn't a documentary about Awaken. And Sound of Freedom was a documentary, and it really highlighted international trafficking, but that is not what we see here. What we see here is truly what is portrayed in this documentary, and it is focused solely on Nevada. And so we interview survivors that have been trafficked in Nevada. We interview traffickers that came to Nevada because Nevada's laws make it easier for them. We interview judges, we interview law enforcement, community officials, people actually hands on the ground doing the work.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for the community to actually hear, what does trafficking look like in Nevada? Because if we're looking for kids being kidnapped and taken overseas, we're going to miss it. Yeah. We're not going to know how to identify it here, because we're looking for the wrong things. And so I love that anybody can come. For our annual fundraiser, sometimes the ticket price for the dinner is higher. These tickets start as low as $30. It is a 50-minute cut of the documentary. Our goal is to hopefully one day make it a multi-episode series, because we have well over 20 plus hours of incredible footage and dramatized scenes. And I really do want to highlight the issue of trafficking, because I truly believe that we have a community that can make a difference, that we can see an end to this issue. And I believe it. Like, we were there both to see the issue end and for the restoration of all of the players involved.
Why did you decide to go with the name At What Cost?
At what cost? Like, is the only state that has legal prostitution, what is the cost to the state? What is the cost to the people? And are we okay with that cost? Are we okay with my pleasure at your cost? And so I think it's important that we actually look, because the whole thing is fueled by money. I think that it's really important that we actually individually look at what cost are we willing to continue to say, yes, we want this, that yes, we're okay with the abuse and exploitation of others. Or are we actually ready to recognize that any abuse to any individual is a cost that's far too high?
For people who are able to come see the film, be a part of the banquet, what do you want them to walk away with? Education,
awareness, and personally, I want them to actually want, one, quit buying sex. And I want them to want to also get in the fight as well, whatever that looks like. Tell their friends, tell their family. But ultimately, I want them to have eyes to see the victims in particular, but the survivors, to see them, not just as people who just like sex or who are choosing it, but to actually see them as human. I think it's really important that we see the human on the other side of that choice. Because I think the second that money hits the table, I no longer see you as human. I'm paying for you to do whatever it is that I want to do to you, regardless of the cost to your body, to your heart, to your mind, because it's now about my power and control. And so I would love people to walk away and actually see you as a human being worthy of love, respect, belonging.
Because that's one of the biggest misnomers. Okay. Well, I was fortunate enough to take part in that documentary.
I know.
Which is a very interesting experience. It was certainly an honor. What direction? We'll start with the cast. How did you go about, getting people involved? How did you come in contact with the survivors? How did that work up, setting the interviews with them?
The survivors on the documentary we've actually known for years. And so we know who they are. We know that they are in positions within their community, that they are making positive change for this movement and just in general. And that they've also completely transformed their life. And so it's amazing to have them as friends, but also their heart to give back to the project as well and to educate their community. Like I said, all of the survivors that worked on this film, they're from Nevada.
Wow.
And so they weren't just trafficked to Nevada for an event, but born and raised and trafficked here. And so I think that was really important that it is from our community.
How much of the interviews and the people that you were able to speak to made the documentary?
Oh gosh, I can tell you everybody we interviewed made the documentary.
Yeah.
Every interview was so amazing because their heart and what they have to say, it doesn't matter if it was a judge or law enforcement, a survivor, or a city official. The fact that it collectively brings us together for a common goal is incredible. I love just the energy and the camaraderie and just the excitement to actually see this thing come to life and to be successful and to impact our community. But it takes all of us. Every interview was amazing. The interviews that I got to be a part of, I left so encouraged.
So I know the focus of At What Cost is about the survivors, their ability to survive and get through what they went through. But I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to include traffickers in the film?
It was an intentional decision, and it was a hard decision, one we didn't take lightly, because we are an organization that focuses solely on the restoration of the survivors. And so to include a trafficker, it's hard, but I also felt it was really important. I think it's important that the community hears from them they're the ones who say Nevada makes it easy for them to traffic women. And hearing it from me is one thing, but to hear it from their mouths is another thing. And these are two traffickers that have been arrested and are actually in our state prisons for abuse that they have done to women. And one of them does have the charge of pandering. So they have been charged with crimes associated to trafficking and pandering. And to actually hear it from their mouths, their idea of even how Nevada makes it easier as a state, I think is really important. You hear it differently, whether it's coming from a mouth of somebody who has been in that life versus me. And I know that was a big decision for you as well, to also be a part of the film and to portray a trafficker. And so I would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I was certainly pleased to get offered to do the position when Stuart had brought it up to me maybe 2 to 3 months ago. He said, hey, I'm working on this documentary. It's called At What Cost? And when I initially heard the title, that's what stuck with me. So I'll talk about that, number one. At What Cost? I am a news personality for a local news, the ABC station here. And I didn't want people to see me just in that trafficker light.
Right.
You know, I was like, okay, you know, I put down some notes. I was like, I have a list of concerns. I called Stuart. We discussed it at length on the phone. I said, do I have to put my hands on someone? He said, no. I said, okay. Am I going to be seen getting arrested? He said, no. I was like, okay. You know, I'm a little bit more on board. You know, but the biggest thing for me is what, I'll never hit women. So was more willing to do it, being he said I didn't have to put my hands on anyone. You know, he said, yeah, the gentleman you're playing used the lover boy method. I said, okay, I could go there and do my best and flirt. Dana did a phenomenal job. It was great to work with her as well. And then the second thing I want to hit on is being a part of the fight. Regardless of what you have going on this side in your day-to-day life, in your typical 9 to 5, we have to stop turning a blind eye to this issue. So I wanted to truly get into the fight and be a part of something. Not only play the role of someone else who I've never met, or a role that I've never played, or an environment that I've never been a part of, but try and get into some sense of character without falling in love with it. So it was walking the balanced line of, it's just bigger than myself, but can people detach my human image from what they'll see on the film? And the thought of that going contrary, it didn't make me afraid, so I was very happy to be a part of it. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And to still stand up for what you believe in.
100%.
Regardless of, because you know there will be people out there that then associate you with the image of a trafficker.
You know, and that, when you put anything out for the public eye, every day I put my work out to the public eye for news reporting, so I get, you know, a lot of good things said about me, but also, you know, not everybody likes me, and that's okay. So if they were to watch the film and be like, oh, I can't not see Nick in that light, I simply tell them, watch the film again.
Yeah.
You missed the point of the film. The film is to not be about the traffickers, number one. It's about the survivors. And it's the role that I was called on to play. I knew that God was watching and I had to perform. So
yeah.
No, it was a pleasure to be a part. I look forward to November 13th.
It was amazing. You did an incredible job.
Oh, thank you.
The entire cast.
Yes.
They so perfectly acted and illustrated what the survivors were saying. And so it really does bring it to life. And it will help the viewer who has no idea what this issue looks like. It'll actually help them be able to see it. And that's important. That it's bringing to life just an idea. And I would say most people have a wrong idea of what trafficking looks like. And this is actually going to bring some accuracy to the issue. And
that's what we want. So one final time, let people know what we have going on the beautiful Wednesday, November 13th.
Wednesday, November 13th at the Grand Sierra in the Grand Theater. The theater seats 2,600 people. We would love to pack it out. And this is going to be for the premiere of the upcoming documentary, At What Cost?
Well, Jen, thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate it. Like I said, this conversation was completely driven by a ton of curiosity on my part and passion on your end. And I super appreciate you sharing your perspective with myself and the so many viewers that are going to be watching this. Certainly, go ahead and get your tickets for November 13th. And if you're not able to make it on that date, there will be another way for you to see it. And thank you so much for watching. Thanks, Shay.
Thank you so much, Nick.
That was amazing.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
They call me the magic man, got a trick up my sleeve. Always pulling the upper hand, I win and repeat. My method is so advanced, like a supercomputer. I wind them up like a rubber band, and I send them back to the future.
One day he picked me up from a job interview and we drove up Tropicana, and I had asked him like, well, where are we going? And he told me, he's like, I have somebody I want you to meet. We pulled into the Orleans parking lot and this girl opened the car door and I looked at him and I was like, what are we doing? And he put his foot on my upper thigh and kicked me out the car and said, go make daddy proud.